Welcome everyone, another episode of Financial 15. Kevin and I are ready to go. Lots of great information. Today we're talking about the disability tax credit. You're going to want to stick around.
Yeah, we're talking about disability tax credit today, but again, you can find this topic or a variety of other ones that we've touched base on our YouTube channel, or go to our website at beckerorr.com. Please check out everything we've got there, or you can also like us on Facebook. Otherwise, let's get into this. Clint, the disability tax credit. What is it?
Good place to start with a definition. What is it? Well, the jargon there, you can see it at the bottom of the screen. A non-refundable tax credit helps persons with disabilities or those that support those individuals. That's the jargon-filled definition there, Kevin. But let's add a few numbers. What kind of credit are we talking about here?
We're talking about a non-refundable federal tax credit. So for 2020, as we mentioned, it is $8,576 as we show there. But if you're under the age of 18, you can also get a supplement for roughly another $5,000 to go on top of that, for over $13,000 that you can be able to claim based on what the federal government's allowing us to deal with right now.
Yeah, and that's a tax credit, so it reduces the amount of tax owing. So if you owed, $10,000 in tax, but you had an $8,500 credit, well, you owe that much less. So you can take $8,500 off the tax that you owe. Now, how you qualify if you're under the age of 18, and let's say they're legal guardians or parents taking care of that individual with a disability, you might be able to get the full credit plus some of the supplement. If that individual with a disability is over the age of 18, they might qualify for it on their own, or if they are in need of someone to support them and they're listed as a financial dependent, the folks doing the supporting could qualify for the disability tax credit. So that's kind of in a nutshell the amount of money and who might be able to qualify. But how do we qualify, Kevin? There's lots of eligibility criteria here. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah, the eligibility is the big one that we should really talk about, because it's not just saying, you've tweaked something, it's going to be a week or two that you can be out or something along those lines. You have to have a disability that basically tends to be ongoing. So as we can see, some of the criteria, first of all, you must be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident to be able to get this. You can't just come over to the country, become a new person in, and then claim the eligibility or the disability credit as it goes. Some of the main areas to look at: you could be blind, you must be markedly restricted in at least one of the basic activities of daily living, or significantly restricted in two or more of the basic activities of daily living. We will get to that in a moment. You may need life-sustaining therapy as well. Now, in addition, the impairment, as we just mentioned, it must be prolonged. You can't have something for a week. It has to have lasted on a regular basis, basically, for at least 12 months, or be present and sustainable all the time, 90% of the time in that period. So it can't be it's on one day, it's off 5 days. You have to have more of this is something that's going to alter your lifestyle down the road. Why don't you walk us through some of the definitions that I've talked about in here?
Yeah, so there's lots of jargon in here, and we're going to get to some of the details in a second, but you're right. This is meant to be a prolonged disability, something that's there a substantial amount of time. And you see in two different areas there, they say you have to be markedly restricted in at least one of the basic activities of daily living, or significantly restricted in two. So what are the activities of daily living? Well, it'd be speaking, hearing, walking, going to the bathroom, feeding, dressing, or the mental functions necessary for day-to-day life. So you can see the definition on the bottom of the screen there. And it's important to note, we're getting this information from Canada.ca. You can go to Canada.ca, you can search the disability tax credit, and you can get all this information and then some, because there are detailed definitions in all these different terms. They spell it out very clearly on what exactly they mean and what qualifies and what's eligible for the disability tax credit. But let's dig into one of those definitions for the folks here, Kevin. We talked about the eligibility criteria. You have to be markedly restricted in one of the basic activities of daily living, or significantly restricted in two. So what's the difference between markedly and significantly?
Well, as we can say, markedly is basically you're unable to do the task within a certain amount of what would be considered normal time for a daily activity. So if you and I get dressed and it takes us 5 minutes, that's one thing. For markedly restricted, it's normally on a basis about 3 times as long. So if it takes you 15 minutes to get dressed, that is markedly. And if that's on a regular ongoing basis, at least 90% of the time, that is considered to be markedly restricted, just to take that as an example. Significantly restricted would be a little bit different. The person does not qualify, but it's not as long. So maybe it takes you 10 minutes to get dressed as opposed to 15. So that's where the big definition is. Now, one other thing just to make a point of is that The government in February of this year, due to COVID and everything else, has basically put out a proposal to expand eligibility on what would be considered mental functions as well as life-sustaining therapy, and how those definitions are accrued.
Yeah, so they're trying to increase the eligibility. Again, that's a proposal that has not gone through yet, but we'll flip back a slide here so folks can see. You can see need life-sustaining therapy is one of the eligibility criteria, so they're proposing to expand that. In addition, we have all the daily functions here listed, and you can see mental functions necessary for day-to-day living is one of those activities. They're proposing to expand that one as well. So they're proposing to expand those criteria to allow more folks to qualify. Again, it's just a proposal, so who knows if it'll go through and if it goes through in the current form. And reminds us again, you do want to check out that website, canada.ca. You can search disability tax credit. You'll get all the up-to-date information on the definitions and what exactly qualifies for this tax credit. So we've covered some of the details there, Kevin, of what it is, how we qualify. If someone says, hey, I meet those criteria, how do they go about applying for that tax credit?
Well, yeah, basically to apply for this tax credit, what you have to do is you have to fill out a form. The government's not just going to take your word on it. They want to make sure that you have actually the disability to be able to claim. So you'll go to the website at canada.ca and download the T2201 form. Now, once you've seen it, Part A is for you to fill out, and Part B is for your medical practitioner to fill out. So remember, you can't just do this on your own. You actually have to have somebody prove that this is a disability going forward. And Clint, when we're talking about a medical practitioner, what are we defining? How are we figuring out who gets to sign off on this form?
Yeah, we mentioned earlier the government has definitions for everything. They got definitions for this too. Don't you worry. There's a long list. So the medical practitioner, who qualifies and what are they allowed to sign off on? So if you're claiming a certain disability, you might need a certain practitioner to fill in the Part B of that form to justify your claim. So if it's a medical doctor, they can fill in all the sections. If it's a nurse practitioner, they can fill in all the sections. If it's a claim about your vision, that's the disability, well, then the optometrist could do that. But if it's a disability involving hearing, well, obviously the optometrist could not sign off on that particular disability. You can see the full list here. Again, this was taken from that website, canada.ca. So you do need to do Part A. That's all information that you can fill in. Then Part B, depending on your disability, you would need a medical practitioner to sign off on that particular disability. They would fill in Part B of that form. You can send that off and then see if you are granted that disability tax credit. So we've gone through a few of the details there, Kevin. It's important to mention that when we do this, when we get the medical practitioners to fill in Part B of the form, they can charge us fees. There's nothing against that. In fact, it says so right on the government website that the medical practitioners can charge a fee to fill in that form. We're responsible for that fee, but you can also claim it as a medical expense on your tax return. So important to keep that in mind. Now, for this particular item, we know we're eligible, we've done the form, but what if we didn't know all these rules, all these details, and we had a disability 5 years ago? Are we allowed to go back and claim those disability tax credits for that year?
Yes, we are. Basically, what the government has said is if you've had this for a while, you can go back 10 years to be able to claim and get a readjustment on what the disability tax credit would be for you. Now, again, as we've just mentioned, you can fill out Part A, and if you had Part A filled out for this year and your medical practitioner filled out Part B, you can claim for this year. But to go back those years, you can't just say, well, I've had this for 10 years and I got to get it. You have to get your medical practitioner to say, yes, he has been disabled or she has been disabled for this long. I will sign and fill out so that they can reclaim going forward. So that is an important thing to know, because a lot of people don't realize there is a disability tax credit. And when they do, they don't realize, oh, well, I've had this for a while, I'd like to be able to claim. The government will allow you to do that for a 10-year track record. Yeah,
so you can file an adjustment. You can go back up to 10 years. So that if you think about it, it's $8,500 a year. That potentially could be a very large tax credit you could receive if you do, in fact, qualify. So it's a large dollar figure. If you do qualify, you certainly want to investigate it. The disability tax credit also opens the doors into other programs. For example, you could also, if you do qualify for the tax credit, it could also allow you to open up a registered disability savings plan, an RDSP. We won't go through all the details now because it's quite involved, but it is a nice savings program. The money can build on a tax-deferred basis. There's lots of grants available for this program. So you put money in and the government could put 2 or 3 times your contribution into this plan. So if you do have the disability tax credit, you certainly would want to investigate if you're able to use the RDSP as well, because it is a very strong program. Yeah, you've mentioned that. And the RDSP, similar to an RESP or an RRSP that's set up, you can
invest in the same eligibility criteria that are in both of those. But as you've mentioned, we could spend an entire topic just talking about this. So we just want to briefly mention it here and go from there. Is there anything else you want to add about disability tax credits, Clint?
I think we covered all the topics there for the disability tax credit. It is quite involved, so if you believe you qualify, I'd encourage you to go to that website one more time. We'll put it on the bottom of the screen there. Search for the disability tax credit in Canada.ca. You'll get lots of information. You can download the form, take it to your doctor, and see if your application does get accepted. Any parting comments for the folks, Kevin?
No, I think that's covered basically everything that it is. If you have a question on this topic in specific or any of the other ones on our website or something that you have in a financial matter, please feel free to chat with Clinton and Kevin down below, as you can see on our website. Anytime you get a chance, we're more than happy to answer the questions and get everything done from there. So other than that, I think this is another great Financial 15. We'll see where we can go from here.
That sounds good. We'll see you folks next week. Take care.